Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about German semi-auto rifle production, the semi-auto rifles in general, the G41, G43 mainly, and should really German semi-auto rifles have even been a thing in World War II. Today we are here with Jared Billy. You might recognize his voice on the podcast, but it's the first time seeing him in a video. Drove all the way from Pennsylvania to the great state of Missouri here.
Yes.
So we have some G43s and G41s here. Not too many people that we know of actually own and have shot, German G41s. So you have a G41 here if you want to show it to everybody.
Yes. This is like the pride of my collection. It's heavier than you'd think. It's even holding it out here. It's heavy.
Yeah, you're like,
yeah.
It's heavy in the worst place because all
Yep.
the weight is out on the end.
Yep.
But it's German semi-auto rifles are cool. We like having them. We would never not have them. But I think we got to talking about like their production and how it lagged behind and everything. And it's just kind of an interesting question on, was the juice worth the squeeze for them? Because it's really, they're good. Now the 41, what was your impressions of the 41 like when you shot it?
It did not recoil as much as I thought it would. I felt like you expect a big, large rifle caliber to give you a good hit, and it was soft. It was very accurate. It was much more accurate than most rifles that I fired that are semi-auto. Typically, a semi-auto, you get a lot of dispersion. The G41 was very, very precise for me.
Yeah, they're a lot more accurate than people, I think, give them credit for. The G41, especially G43. I know a guy who wins a lot of competitions with the G43. He beats M1 Garens and everything.
Yes.
So they're a lot more accurate than you would think. But yeah, the 41, it was, I've said it before, but it was so light recoiling. I handed it off to my wife and I'm like, hey, put some rounds through this because I knew it wasn't going to beat her up. She enjoyed shooting it. Other than the gun being heavy, she didn't like holding it for that long. But yeah, they're good performing rifles if properly maintained. Your parts aren't broken and everything.
Kept clean, not frozen, not stuck. When I pulled this rifle apart, when I purchased it, the gas piston was stuck.
Yep, mine was too.
Yes.
But yeah, both the ones that I've owned, including this one.
Yes.
Yeah, the little, it's like a piston ring piston around the barrel, and that was just stuck on. And there's actually a little bit of pitting on it.
Yes, mine as well.
It's
corrosive onto it, and they're coming up on 80 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think a lot of people, it's a pain to clean.
Yes.
G41s are a lot harder to clean than normal, any kind of semi-auto rifles that you might think of. And you have to break it down and scrub all the internals of this whole front assembly for the bang system. So it's a whole thing just having to clean it. So I can see why people don't. And unfortunately, most of these that you come across, people haven't really, cleaned and kept up with. So
yes.
It's funny. I wonder how many people all had the same experience when they got a 41.
Yeah.
It's just frozen up.
Yeah, I'm sure that they haven't cleaned it in years. And it was this black, nasty, sticky gunpowder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if it shot still, even though it kind of was frozen up.
I feel like it probably would. It probably wouldn't function. It may not function and extract all the way or eject all the way, but it would probably do a little bit.
Yeah. So, decent performing. I would say, as far as reliability, I would say the 41 and the 43 are at least as reliable, maybe a little more reliable than the SVT-40. I think it just depends on your SVT and whether or not it's a refurb or whatnot. Yeah. But it's pretty reliability for early 40s. I think it's okay.
Yeah, quite well.
It's not it's not like the heavily refined M1 rifle, which is how many decades of refinement was put into that gun? Peacetime refinement versus rushed wartime. We got to get this thing out there, kind of thing with the 41. Both the 41 and the 43, they didn't go through very extensive trials because of the war. The Germans were just kind of
they did
it's
troop
cool,
trials.
It works. They did troop trials, but I think with the 43, they adopted it even before the troop trials were done.
Oh, wow.
OKH just approved it even though the trials weren't done.
Yeah.
So I think they get info, and they worked on the 43 based on the troop trial info. But they're cool guns. But we're just gonna have to get into the discussion here.
Yes.
So the time frame, I think, for the G41 is interesting because most of the G41s were made in 1943. You know, the G43s, K43s, these were like a late 44 before there was like enough of them made and they actually made it to the front lines, like in big enough numbers to do anything. 41s, like I said in the G41 video, by the time of the Normandy landings, so like mid 44, the G41 was the most common frontline semi-auto rifle.
Yes.
It was more common than the G43 on frontline service. So it's kind of, they were very reactionary, right? And there's like a very Amerocentric view, I think, on like the German G41, kind of like Darren's old book, you know, Hitler's Garand. People tend to think of it as Hitler was copying the M1, you know, like, you know, oh, they're facing the M1, but really it all had to do with the Soviets and, you know, Operation Barbarossa and them seeing the need for a semi-auto rifle. But it was very reactionary and it was very, very late to the game.
Yes. Yeah, they were very behind. Most countries had already had a semi-auto rifle, had it for years before they even started. And
they tried, they dabbled before the war. I think it was just one of those things they didn't focus on it a lot. And they're, you know, the squad tactics were different. You know, the squad tactics for the Germans wasn't based around a bunch of dudes with semi-auto rifles all laying down. You know, all had to do with their universal machine gun. You know, the squad was based around the machine gun, MG34, MG42. That provided the majority of the firepower. The rifle, submachine guns, everything was just kind of secondary power to that. And if you read a lot of memoirs, I think we both kind of read a lot of German World War II memoirs. And you can hear, like, the guys in the books when they're talking about, like, you know, they're fighting a defensive battle against the Russians. Like, life or death, like, whether or not they're going to live or not, is based all around if they can keep the machine gun up and firing.
Yes.
So, like, individual rifle is probably a lot less important than we assume, like, today. I'm sure for, like, the dude behind it, it's important, you know, obviously. But as far as the overall achieving an objective, I think the individual soldier, the one guy's firepower, is maybe not the most important.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember the book where, maybe it was Blood Red Snow. They talked really good about machine gun tactics there, where it was like, there'd be the machine gunner, and a couple guys with K98Ks, because K98Ks kind of tended to stay with the machine gunner. And then the guys with, like, the submachine guns, MP40s and whatnot, they would be like kind of the guys to, like, assault, to go forward. So, just kind of different tactics than what we're thinking of. So it's kind of, if you're thinking about the semi-auto rifles, German semi-auto rifles and everything, you kind of have to step back out of the Amerocentric view of it.
Yes, yeah. Everyone tends to think of, I had my gun, I am a rifleman, we're a squad full of riflemen. No, we are a squad with machine gunners. We have a machine gunner, and we are his ammo carriers.
Yeah.
Is all it is. Everyone gets ammo cans, and you're carrying ammo. Like, that's all you do.
Yeah, especially, like, by the end of the war, when you see soldiers, they're loaded with just belts of ammo. They're just, they're ammo carriers for the machine gun, to keep the machine gun up, because, you know, the 42s ate through it.
Yes.
So when you see guys in the pictures, you know, if they're heading to the front or something, they got belts over their shoulders, their ammo cans full, carrying it.
Yes.
So it's really all about the machine gun. So just to kind of put German semi-autos in context. So they're a little bit late in the war, and the Germans are being reactionary to the SVTs. So the thing with, like, the Russians and their semi-auto rifle program, you know, they came out with the SVT-38, SVT-40, of course, at the beginning of the war. Now, the Russians pretty early on understood that, like, a semi-auto rifle is not as great for assault troops as a high rate of fire submachine gun.
Yes.
They really liked the submachine gun, and they had whole, like, submachine gun squads. Like, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, Russian soldiers that were like shock troops or something that all had, you know, PPSHs, and that was the gun. And pretty early on, I'm thinking like 42 or 43, I forgot the exact year, the Russians switched over. They started cutting back on SVT-40 production. So around 42, 43, the Soviets understand, like, okay, semi-auto rifles, not that important. We really need submachine guns. Let's make more submachine guns. And the Germans are kind of doing the opposite. The Germans are like, oh, we need semi-auto rifles. Mm-hmm. because this is an old 1941 program
Yes.
that they're like continually like implementing. And that's a weird thing to think of, that the 43, with the G43 nomenclature is just a continuation of the 1941 semi-auto rifle. But it's a different war. 1940, 1941, where they decided they need a semi-auto, to when they got the guns, like in 44, it's a different war.
It actually mirrors itself a little bit. When the Soviets initially started production of them, they were on the defensive.
Yeah.
And when the Germans started the mass production of the rifles, they are now on the defensive. This is after Kursk. So the defensive armies tend to use the semi-auto rifles in this instance.
Yeah, which is it a coincidence that they both happen to sort of change? Which is a neat thing about the war in general. You see that the Russians adopting a lot of German tactics as far as like pincer movements and encircling armies and stuff like that, and like the Germans kind of adopting the less good tactics that the Russians were using early on with Hitler getting rid of the top generals and all, being more political instead of military based.
Static defense, not giving up any ground. When you could give up a town and fight on the ridge line and have a better defense, nope, can't give the town up.
Yeah, it's a fortress,
yes.
So you had to defend it to the last man.
Yes.
And a lot of he ordered, it's a little bit off topic, but he ordered so many troops to their death or imprisonment or whatever because he just refused to give up an area.
Yeah.
When he desperately needed troops, he should have pulled them back in different areas.
Yeah, someplace that has no strategic resource. It's a burned out shell of a husk of a town.
Yeah, and nope, it's a fortress. You got to defend it now. So it's really interesting. Like Hitler started doing that at the end, and that's what Stalin was kind of doing.
In the beginning. Yeah. Which is why they encircled armies, the mass, millions of soldiers. Like.
So now there's sort of the meat of the video, which is the question of, should the Germans have even bothered? Should they have kept dumping massive amount of resources into G43, G41 production at that late in the war? Or should they have done like the Soviets did and identified that a semi-auto rifle is maybe less important than submachine gun development? And for the Germans, also the Sturmgewehr, the assault rifle production, was it more important to have these semi-auto rifles take up? Was the juice worth the squeeze as far as it comes to the German semi-auto rifles? We know that we don't necessarily agree on this, but we haven't talked about why yet. So we're going to kind of do that on camera. I'll let you answer first. So, Do you think the Germans should have kept dumping resources into their semi-auto rifle production?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And the reason that I have 3 reasons that I do.
Okay, great.
The first is squad tactics. You are carrying ammo for the machine gun. Your secondary task is to have the rifle. Your task is to support the machine gun when they're in the middle of a barrel change and when they are in the middle of changing a belt, because they typically ran a belt and then a barrel if they had the ability to, because the barrels got too hot. So you have to keep up the same base of fire or similar base of fire at the same range. Moves into my next point. Range is important. If your job is to keep the enemy away from the machine gun and your effective range with an MP40 is 100 yards, you've already lost, because they're on top of the machine gun and the machine gun cannot beat them back from that 100-yard position. The last point that I've had is the technology to make the rifles is the same as it is or similar to making the K98. Oh, another point. So the K98s are not using stamping technologies. They are not using stamping manufacturing. They are using older school technology that we know how to use and we've been doing for years. How to make a wood stock, how to make a rifle barrel. And lastly, and most importantly, in my opinion, is ammunition compatibility. I use the same machine gun ammo as we all use the same guns on the line. We all use the same ammunition. The MG42s and 34s use 8mm Mauser. My rifle uses 8mm Mauser. They are issued in different ways, but if I got to de-link machine gun ammo, I'll de-link machine gun ammo to give to my troops. If I've got to take ammo out of boxes and put it links into machine gun to feed the gun, I'll feed the gun. But the MP40 and the Sturmgewehrs, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of points. I'm trying to think of which one to start at. So the K98Ks did use a couple stamped components. They tried. It takes more time to make the 43, more time and more money to make an automatic rifle versus the Mauser. So it's crazy. Like of all this is like they were making bolt action rifles, up until like 45, which is like it's kind of a crazy thing. They needed everything. Now, as far as like the squad based support, yeah, their job is to keep the machine gun up, but I don't think they had enough guns to ever actually like mimic the rate of fire of a machine gun.
Oh, definitely not. They would, yeah. Especially later, they would have a man per 100 yards or worse. And so,
for the G43, Hitler ordered that he wanted 2 G43s per squad in every squad. He wanted every German infantry squad to have 2 G43s. And later on, that was reduced because they couldn't make enough. It was reduced to like 1. The goal was to get at least 1 G43 in each squad. So how much of a difference, like one guy in the machine gun group having a G43 versus and just having a K43 instead, or K98K instead? Yeah,
probably minimal.
Yeah. And then and that on a grand scale, which is all the extra hours and money and everything spent going into those semi-auto rifles for the machine gunners that aren't making that huge of a difference, is the thing. Ammo compatibility, the German ammo was issued on the 5-round clips.
Yes.
And yeah, with logistics and whatnot, you would just, like, if the infantry had plenty of ammo and the machine guns had no, and they had time, yeah, they could, put the ammo on links, that sort of thing. But I think machine guns still had enough priority that I don't think they would be shortchanged if they had another gun, like if they had, MP44s.
Remember with that though, all of your ammunition is being brought to you by pony carts. It's not being brought to you on a truck.
Yeah. So for sure, which is a bigger deal early in the war, but by the late stage of the war, the Germans are getting pretty close to their own, they're in their own country, or they're right next to their own country. So the supply is not like as huge of a thing as really just their trains and everything's getting bombed and they can't, they can't get stuff out there. So ammo compatibility, I'm still not certain that the increased rate of fire from the machine gun guys having G43s, the increased rate of fire is worth the extra time into it. The rate of fire, or how close the enemy is to the machine gun sort of thing, I don't think within 100 yards was as big of a deal for them. A lot of the original photos that you see, they had a bunch of grenades all around where they would.
Yeah, grenades was more of what I was thinking. If the guys are close enough to throw a grenade, you're in a bad day.
I think they understood that they got close, and they got close enough that it's very often when you're looking at pictures of a German MG emplacement, they have a bunch of stick grenades with the pins or the strings hanging out at the bottom, ready to be pulled and chucked. And that's what they would do when the guys got close. They didn't so much rely on their bolt actions or their rifles or anything. If the MG went down, they're just chucking grenades because those can take out multiple guys. And some of the stories I've read, they've Russians were piled up 10 meters in front of the machine gun. So yes. I think they can crank it out. I think maybe if it's in a heavy machine gun roll versus a light machine gun roll, that might be a different thing. But in all that, I don't necessarily see that huge of a difference if there's 1 or maybe even 2 K43s in there, especially because of the whole. I think I might have mentioned this before with the reloading the K43s.
Yes.
So you have to have mag retention. If you're lucky enough, by 44 or whatever, usually these guys, they're not getting issued an extra mag. They just have the 1 mag in the gun, which means when they're reloading 5-round stripper clips, which is kind of a similar rate of reloading to a K98K, albeit a faster rate of fire they can have, but the reload rate is still, a little bit slow. I guess maybe just twice as long as a K98K because you have to load, 2 clips. So my thought, by this stage of the war, especially how much resources and everything it's gobbling up, and not just the rifles and not just the 3 big factories that are making this thing, but also all the subcontractors that are making parts. And in my thought process, I'm thinking about what if these factories, instead of putting a lot of time into semi-auto rifles. What if they just made MP40s, which are way cheaper and easier and faster? Like, how do you think that same squad of guys, instead of having K98Ks, if they all had MP40s instead of K98Ks, like defending the machine gun? If the machine gun goes down, they'll pull out MP40s.
Yeah, that would be, the firepower advantage would be nice, but the same thing, you have to feed them ammo, and there was an ammo shortage coming near the end.
Yeah. I think more from like logistics than they had, not enough. It's just the problem of getting it there. But yeah.
Magazines as well. So the MP40, you need to have the magazines to make them as well.
That's true. And they're all retained.
Yes.
Like, I think so many people have like this Call of Duty mindset or something.
Yeah, drop the mag on the ground.
That they're just like dropping these mags, but like, no, they got to keep them.
Yeah.
Like, they're in their Zold book,
Yeah.
like how many mags they're issued with.
Yes.
And like, if they lost their magazines, like, that's a punishable offense.
Yes.
Like, they're very strict. You had to have your gas mask and like all this stuff. And if you lost anything, like, you get sent to a penal battalion or demoted or something for the most minor infraction. So mags were retained, which slows down the reload.
Yes.
Greatly slows down the reload process of the 43. So having semi-auto rifles, it's not a disadvantage by any means. It's more of a
luxury.
Yeah.
It's a luxury.
Yeah. It's more of a luxury. It's from the individual like rifleman mentality. Yeah, it'd be much better to have a semi-auto rifle. And I've heard some stories of soldiers with G43s that actually did really like them. And one guy, I think he had a scope on his, and he had this story of how he like held off a whole Russian squad or something like that with just his G43. So it's not nothing, but also maybe if like the Sturmgewehr didn't exist, it would be a little bit more of like oh yeah, they definitely should have had G43s. But like going back to Hitler being dumb, like he should have just said, oh yeah, we don't need the MKB-42 existed.
Yes, it did.
Like it's why have semi-autos when they should just like, oh, how about everyone, instead of tooling up for the semi-auto rifle, we just all tool up and make a Sturmgewehr.
I don't know how many plants they had that had the stamping capabilities. That was the only.
Yeah.
Because the MG42s use a lot of stamping, and then the MP40s use a lot of stamping, and then the Sturmgewehrs use stampings. And there's no plant code that I'm aware of where like they made rifles at the same time as they made machine guns. I'm sure there are.
Yeah. Now the 43 used quite a bit of stampings.
Yes.
43s. There are some stamped parts on 41s.
Yes.
But then they switched over and started using even more stamped components on the 43. And they brought over, I forgot the name of the company, but like Walther couldn't figure out how to like transition the action cover from the milled to the stamped. So they brought in another company that specialized in stamping to Walther to develop this new the new machines and techniques and everything for making the stamped action cover, which is this part back here.
Yeah, mine's milled.
Yeah,
These are milled.
They're mostly milled on 41s. The very, very beginning of 43s they were milled, but then they quickly switched over to the stamped. So there was some stamping capabilities, I guess, with G43s at the G43 factories, and they did suck away like resources from the company that was developing like the stamping. Like maybe if the company that helped them design the stamped action cover could have just helped them come up with stamped MP44 receivers and done that instead. But this is all just kind of what is this?
Speculation.
Yeah, speculation and just alt history.
Yes.
But it's just interesting to think of, and I'm glad we don't agree.
Oh yes.
I think it's much more interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit, and I was no.
Yeah.
You're wrong. Like it was very much we do not agree on this.
They're great rifles, but with the detriments of reloading, because the 41 has a fixed mag.
Yes, it does.
So all the resources, the development, the steel, the workers, the factories that go into the 41 to make the 41 the most common semi-auto rifle in 1944, which is like 120,000 or something like that out there. If that had gone into any other gun, that had reached the front lines in hundreds of thousands of numbers by 1944, I think that would have made a much bigger impact than a gun with a 10-round fixed box magazine that took, 5-round stripper clips.
Although they are not producing things to lose, they are producing to win, and their competitors are all using a semi-auto rifle.
So you mean like...
I'm saying they're catching up with the times. They can see the writing on the wall for the future.
Yeah, that's true, but they were already jumping ahead.
Yes.
With the MKB-42s and MP-43, 44s, they had it, and so in my mind, like if I was like Speer, like I would have just been like, stop semi-auto rifle production, if you can't make STGs, make MP40s, like right away, because I just think a submachine gun with 30 rounds in the mag, like, okay, here's a good question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in the front lines, you're defending against, Russian wave attacks or whatever, would you rather have, a G43, we'll say a G43 over a 41, because I think everybody would want a 43 over 41 in the front lines. Would you rather have a 43 or would you rather have an MP40?
I would say it depends on the area. Because if I'm at sea low heights and I can see forever, I'd rather have the range. But if I'm in the woods of the marshlands of Russia, probably an MP40, because you can't effectively engage targets at a distance of more than the tree line.
Yeah, but most combat is not taking place at like that crazy far distance anymore.
Oh, I'm not even saying crazy far.
Though,
I'm saying 100 yards, I'd want a rifle.
Yeah, well, I mean, the MP40 is... it stretches out there to about 100 yards.
Yeah.
is like the limit. So you'd rather have inside of 300 yards. That's a toss up. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But inside 100 yards, MP40.
I would rather have an MP40. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, I think that's the... Yeah, I for sure would rather have an MP40. Also, just carrying around. MP40s are small and light and handy.
Yeah. Compact. You can get in and out of stuff places. Yeah, very easy.
30 or 32 round stick mag. That's pretty swell, Even if even it's 3 times as many, as the G43, even if you have to shoot every guy 3 times instead of 1.
Yes.
Like the 43, that's still...
You still got 2 rounds left over?
Yeah. yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just feel like if the semi-autos, if it was like a year before, if they started production in like 40, and then the rifles were coming out in like 41, 42, and then by 1943 they were like pretty mass issued, I think it's okay.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
But by like mass production of 41s being in 1943, it's like why so late? And then G43's mass production in 44. I think it's too late. My opinion is that's too little, too late. They nowhere, and you can't make the rifles in big enough numbers, and you can't make the magazines in nearly enough numbers.
Yeah.
They made 414,000 G43 K43s, and they made 1 million magazines for these guns, like in total. And the the magazines were getting used up in other guns too. So like, if you were given a G43 with a mag, you basically just got a lighter G41, because you're not swapping out the magazines. You still have your K98K pouches, and you're still reloading with 5-round magazines.
Yes.
So overall, like, as far as a grand increase of like a squad or something, I think it's negligible. And especially by the end of the war, we're not having enough steel.
Or the right kind of steel.
Yeah, the right kind of steel. Not having enough factories that aren't bombed. I think it would have been a smarter decision for them to switch over into MP40s or SCG-44s.
We agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. I think we're thinking about it differently.
Yes.
And I think in a small way we might agree, because I think you're maybe thinking about it like small unit tactics.
Yeah, the platoon or the company or the squad.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm thinking more like grand strategy, like attrition kind of way.
Yes.
We're like, I'm not saying it would be bad. for like a squad to have an extra, semi-auto rifle or two, if they had a 43 or two, sprinkled in there, that wouldn't be a bad thing. But was it a bad thing overall for their production that the resources and everything got sucked into semi-auto rifles?
Yeah, I feel like it's just thinking about it smaller. Like Carl has a G43, and Carl's a really good shot, and it's nice to know that he's there and can lay down more of a volume of fire while we're trucking ammo. And the guys on the boots on the ground, the guys that like them, they don't know how many are being made. They assume everyone's got one.
Yeah, that's true. And they were probably concentrated a little bit more into like the elite units. Like I'm sure like Gross Deutschland or like the 2nd SS or whatever got a lot more 43s and K43s than like just some random like supply guys or whatever. But I guess in those limited circumstances, it's worth it for those guys right there.
Yes.
But grand picture. Resources to resources. If you could have 2 MP40s for every 1 G43, what's more effective to the guys? Like there's always like this is aside from K98K production stopping. There's always going to be K98Ks in a squad for the long range, kind of support. Would it be better for a couple of those guys with K98Ks to have MP40s or a couple more?
Yeah, I would say it probably would be.
So yeah, it's a toughie. I don't know.
It is. It is a very, very tough.
Yeah, and it's a little abstract here, but we're curious on what you guys think. Let us know which one of us you agree most with, or if you have, or if you just have a completely differing opinion on this. Just let us know. We read all the comments for all the videos, so especially this one, we'll both be reading and replying to. So let us know what you guys think. Thank you so much, Jared Billy, for coming on and talking about an obscure topic like German semi-auto rifle production and whether or not it should be a thing, which it definitely shouldn't. Everybody should know that. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.